Welcome everyone. We're here on the Ananda Rose channel. You're here with your host Kirsty. So I'm just popping in with the Neurodiversity Controversy segment. Haven't been here for a while, but I'm back and really happy to welcome Pauline Cartwright to the show. And so Pauline wears a lot of hats, I would say. So she's a Reiki practitioner, access bars, she does intuitive readings, and also, and this matches her background, and I really love this, she also does, tell me if I get this right, forest immersion healing, basically. It's like forest immersion therapy. Yeah. Yeah. Nature therapy, basically. And I love that so much. So, and she also has some interesting experiences with dyslexia. So that's bringing in this neurodiversity element of the show. And the purpose is to look at it from all sorts of different angles, people's personal experiences, different opinions. Sometimes it gets to be a little bit of a controversial topic, I think unnecessarily so. So it's just really great to have these conversations. So yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thank
you. And how are you going with all of these supermoon lunar eclipse energies? Are you feeling it?
How could you not feel it?
I know. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's always a challenge to be able to sleep during this period.
Yeah. Interestingly, since I've become a mother, I actually sleep better. Of course, it was terrible for years because the boys were up all through the night, but I think I got so tired that I got better at dropping off when I had the chance. So that's one perk.
Yeah.
But it was last night, my 8-year-old was having wild dreams. And that's very kind of on point for him. He's super in tune with the energies, and he really feels it. Yeah. And then when I had a little time to go into the forest today, so that's yay, and it was amazing. And I just dropped into a little meditation, and I had the protea flower coming up, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And so I was like, yeah, it feels like a nice strong energy for these times. And so then of course I searched on the internet, what's the spiritual meaning of protea, and it's transformation, diversity, strength, and courage. And I thought that's quite on point. So I thought I'd bring it in.
Wow, that's amazing.
To support, the conversation.
Yeah, that's incredible because protea is flower in summer. That's incredible. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Just going with the botanical vibe.
Yeah, good on you.
So coming back to topic, that was me going on a tangent. So tell me about your experiences as a child, and whether or not you knew you were dyslexic. What was that experience like?
Well, I grew up in rural New Zealand with part-time farming parents, and my dad worked as a sawmill manager as well. So rural living, basically, and most of our life was spent outside. We weren't allowed to be inside.
Yes, swept out, get out, yeah.
Outside. So my life was very hands-on and tactile, and I loved playing in nature, of course, and loved playing with art as well. And my mother was very good at art, and I learned to love art so much, and art for me was just my go-to. And when I went to primary school, I had trouble speaking. And then they thought there was something wrong with my eyes. So what did they do? They took me to the eye doctor, the optometrist. And what did he say? There's nothing wrong with her eyes. So they gave me eye exercises, which I think it was only about 4 exercises that I did, and they made no difference at all. Yes, it might have strengthened the muscles of my eyes, and but they didn't change the letters from being back to front, and the words would blur in the middle, like was, saw, how. Simple words would blur in the middle, and saw would become so, SOW, and things like that. And then I had trouble with, and I still have trouble if I'm tired and I don't think about it beforehand. I have trouble with THs and S's and F's.
Yeah.
And they come out the wrong way. And I get very tongue-tied too. With my words, I hated public speaking because I'd mess my words up, and I'd be reading it, you know, how you do the school speeches, and I'd try to read it and then it would just be a blur. Yeah, and my hands were all sweaty and I'm like, I can't do this. So I hated public speaking, and this for me to speak publicly right now is quite difficult. So I have to slow it down and think about what I'm saying. So I had no formal
diagnosis
tuition, no,
or
diagnosis, tuition, nothing. Never heard of dyslexia until my second child was born, my daughter, and she couldn't talk as a toddler, and she would just grunt
and point.
But she could do the point, like that. And people at Play Centre would almost bully her and bully me and say, why can't you do something with your daughter, you know, and ridicule us, both of us. But I'd say to her, well, draw how you feel. So she would draw the most, as a toddler, she would draw, and she would draw pictures of people and faces, and happy faces, sad faces. So she drew how she felt. So going into kindergarten, same thing. I said to them, get her to draw. She'll tell you how she feels. So they did. And it wasn't until she was 7 years old that she was formally diagnosed, because her teacher had a daughter who was dyslexic. And then I was introduced to the dyslexic world, having never heard of the word before in my life. And it opened up a whole new world. And then through her eyes, and learning through her eyes and recoding, and she was unschooled, and then she was reschooled or retaught in the way that a dyslexic mind needs to learn. We had many amazing tutors, but we had one in particular that was just, she always said that we will give you the key to unlock the door of your learning. And that's what she did. And I learned through my daughter that I too was dyslexic, and that my mother is too, because she can't spell.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so interesting. And it's so common that we learn things through our children, all sorts of things. But yeah, when it comes to the world of neurodiversity, very often we learn things about ourselves. So yeah, because I was similar. You know, my firstborn was so obviously ADHD. And all the classic traits of hyperactivity, just really out there, always moving, super intense. Yeah. Like so very obvious. And so then I researched it, and then I went, ADHD in women, and I was like, ooh. Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? And then I wonder about autistic traits. Ooh. And so, yeah, it often opens up a whole world of, understanding about the self and, I don't know about you, maybe more compassion for yourself as a child,
Yeah.
understanding for that whole experience. But just coming back to just the dyslexia, it's interesting because like a lot of these terms or diagnoses, the definition kind of evolves over time. And you've referred to a lot of these things, but most of us, when we think about dyslexia, the first thing we think of is trouble with reading and writing, and those kind of more obvious traits, like, as you said, reversing B's and D's, letters blurring or jumping around the page. And then you also talked about this often on the plus side, because there's always strengths that come along with having different ways that your brain processes information, connects things up in novel ways, so that we have diversity in the way that people see the world. So the upshot tends to be, from what I've seen, this great creativity, that big picture thinking, entrepreneurship that's often cited, and these kind of the visual strength, the strength in this visual processing, which frankly I'm in awe of, because I'm the opposite in many ways, actually. So I'm not very visual at all. I like to write everything down, and I'm very wordy. And so it's interesting to see these different
Mm,
strengths.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you touched on that. And often they're very dyslexic or neurodivergent people are often very high IQ.
Mm,
My daughter's IQ is 140, and she was in the elite honors of high school for 2 years in a row. And so she showed all the naysayers,
yeah.
she showed them that she could achieve in a high level in the top of was it 5% of the top scholars in the school for 2 years in a row. And she got her name on the honors board. And yeah, it's often you are discounted and put down and bullied and ridiculed, but often these people are incredibly intelligent. I mean, you look at Albert Einstein, Richard Branson, Whoopi Goldberg, there's this huge list of people who are dyslexic, and they're often the change makers in this world, because they think outside the box.
Yeah.
They can't be in a box. You can't contain them in a box
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
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 And I mean, our whole family, including my children's family on the paternal side,
Mhm.
are all on the spectrum.
Yeah.
My son, my firstborn, ADHD.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was exactly like your son.
Yeah. Just
You had,
bouncing off the walls. Like, whoa.
oh,
Yeah.
totally, yeah, in trouble all the time and breaking things and blocking things and flooding things and you name it. We virtually had to have a lid on him because if we didn't hear where he was, if there was quietness, it was, uh-oh, something's happening. And
Yeah.
he recognizes that now. He's a high school teacher and he recognizes his ADHD now, and he has got a good handle on it. As a high school teacher, he's been able to research himself.
Yeah. Yes. And then and easily recognize all of his students who have those traits as well, which is
Yes,
incredibly
yes,
valuable for them. Yeah.
It's very empathetic towards, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so then I'm kind of curious about what changes you may have noticed for yourself initially when you were doing things alongside your daughter, and then also just as a natural evolution, because we have these diverse brains that connect up in different ways, and part of it's innate and part of it sometimes is to do with stress, and the brain is also malleable and it evolves. So yeah, tell me about that, how things shifted over time.
I think it's just those little pearls of wisdom that drop in as you are working with your children who are neurodivergent, divergent. I can't even say the word. I get tongue-tied with words because I've got to visualize the word and I have to break
Yes.
it down into
Yeah.
syllables to be able to
Mm.
say it. So it's got to go from here into there.
Yeah.
So I have to work out how to say it. And that's fun.
That
So
is
for
that is super interesting. And apparently they've even identified that using kind of MRI scanning and things now, these different ways that the dyslexic brain is processing. So
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
it's super cool to hear you describe it actually.
yeah. And we were talking about being like I visualize everything, so I have to visualize the word.
Mm,
Um, but the weird thing is Latin words I don't have a problem with. So botanical words, as you talked about before, I don't have a problem with. I can say any of the plant names like that.
that's
But
yeah, it's a different
English language,
system. Yeah. Well, English is not logical at all, actually. So sometimes you can work things out from the Latin root, but it's almost like a whole bunch of different languages with all their different rules just mushed together. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, Latin, Greek, Italian, oh, there's all sorts, French,
Mm.
they're all in there. And it's highly confusing for the brain, you
It
know.
makes no sense. It really doesn't. I really, with doing reading with my children, I'm like, gosh, I think we should be really glad that English is our first language because
Yeah, we got the most difficult language. That's what often people say. And grammar, oh my gosh.
mm.
It, put it this way, it wasn't my forte. Mine was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so getting back to
Mm.
working with my daughter,
Hmm.
um it was just every moment and every time and every place that she was put in her learning, um it just dropped in with me and I realized I'm the same. We're the same. And
Mm.
I understand her. A lot of people don't understand her, but I understand her. Even as a toddler, I understood what her actions and nuances were. I could read her, but other people couldn't because their minds are closed. Their minds
Mm.
are very lineal and they're inside the box. Whereas our minds were outside the box, and I could understand through her body language and her gestures, her the tone of her voice, even of what she was trying to portray to me. So I
Mm.
got it, and I still get it. um, she's a vet nurse now, veterinary nurse, and she's had to learn a lot of theoretical knowledge that was really challenging for her, but she did it. She's very determined. She's one of the most determined people I know,
Mm.
and to keep learning. She wants to keep learning.
Mm. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I think the perspectives on people who are dyslexic or have are neurodivergent in other ways are definitely shifting a lot now, which is great. There's a lot more awareness, and it's almost like a pendulum swinging. So sometimes it's now almost trendy, or people think that they're almost better than because they've got these letters after their name. So, you know, humans, we're very funny. We like to have categories, and they're very useful, but sometimes we get, you know, overly hung up on them. And, you know, at some stage we're evolving as a species. So at some point we won't need any of the descriptors because we'll communicate in such an open-hearted and telepathic way anyway. But at the moment, it's usually very helpful to understand these kind of idiosyncrasies about oneself. And you know, it's really funny because I get tongue-tied as well, and tongue-tie runs in our family, you know, like the literal tongue-tie. Yeah. But I'm not dyslexic, but I was also a silent child, but for different reasons. So yeah, super anxious and, you know, possibly autistic, although I've never been identified as such officially. And so it's, you know, it's very interesting and useful for parents if they have a young child to get these different views on the various things that could be going on with their child, and to just keep that open mind and, you know, really tune in, you know, what, like with your parents' intuition to what's going on, as opposed to, oh, well, they should be needing this, and they should be developmentally doing that. And, oh, perhaps your parenting's a bit off, and all those anxieties.
And that's very hard on as a parent, and they say your child is not reaching their milestones. And then they start looking at you as a parent and saying, well, what are you doing wrong? Where have you gone wrong with them? And it's not. And, you know, they label you then. And, you know, we had a very horrible incident with my daughter when we shifted from one town to another town, and the teacher that she got in that first school we went to in this new town, the teacher labeled her as dumb. So she would have her red pen, angry writing, cross out all her work, not good enough, do it again. And this went time after time. So I said, well, I'm going to sit in the class and watch, which you're entitled to as a parent. You're allowed to watch. So I did. And she didn't change. This teacher didn't change her habit at all. She still picked on and bullied my daughter, but not just my daughter, other children, boys. She would put cardboard boxes around them.
Wow.
A cardboard box, like a fridge box,
to keep them still.
Yeah. And this boy, she did it to. He's also dyslexic. So we took her out of that school and put her in the other school in this town that we lived in. And there was 8 from that class that left. And they were all neurodivergent children.
Yes.
And the other school just welcomed them in and said, look, we're going to work with you. We're going to place you in a friendship circle to my daughter. And we're going to give you a teacher aide. And we're going to give you all this funding. Well, she won a cup at that school when she graduated in year 6? And she won a cup for her tenacity and her determination.
Amazing.
So, that's
so great that she was able to go from that negative experience to that that positive one. I was just about to say, because you're saying it does a lot of damage, and it does. We remember. I know. I was a goody two shoes in school, because I loved reading and writing, and that's this artificial kind of construct of you're academic, you're smart. If you happen, not as much now, but if you happen to have the type of smart that fits in the box, and I did. I had book smarts, and I even so. I still remember the times where, I was shamed or ridiculed or, got in
Yeah.
trouble, you remember them. And so when it's happening over and over, that, creates a whole kind of trauma pattern that then needs to
Oh,
be healed. Yeah.
it imprints on you. And she then went on to having this PTSD.
Yeah.
And she's had counselling for years because of this one teacher.
Yeah.
And always when something goes wrong at work, she might do something that was just a little bit incorrect, and the trauma would come back. And she's still having counselling, and she's nearly 30.
Yeah.
This one teacher undid all her learning, and it took her a long time to get that confidence. It's still the imprint of that trauma is still there. And people don't realize how much power they've got with their actions and their words on these neurodivergent children and
Yeah.
adults.
Yeah. Yes, it's so incredibly important that, the way we treat our children, especially our sensitive children.
Yes.
And, I guess on the positive side, the damage is never permanent. We know that as people who work with energy, you can always shift it. You can always, you know, recognize the patterns for what they are and do it a new way. But it's, you know, it's it's work, and it'll be preferable to use that energy to just go straight into creating a beautiful life, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And she's creating a beautiful life within herself at the moment. She's pregnant.
Yay.
But she will now be aware with her child coming into this world
Mm,
on the signs to look for and to help her child. And she's so fortunate because a lot of children born probably before the early 80s didn't get this help in schools
mm,
and got labeled as dumb or naughty children, or
yeah.
yeah, they were the ones that always, sent to the principal's office. But it's just that those children were they're not seen.
They're
They were
not
not heard.
saying no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's always interesting to look back at those things through the lens of the current knowledge and also of being a parent, because after having my boys who are similar to me but so different in many ways and have never been to school, they would have been in so much trouble. They would have been classed as behind all of the things even now. But through seeing them, then I kind of automatically reflected on the kids I went to school with, and all of the ones, mostly boys, but not all, who were the ones who were always in trouble and who had trouble reading and writing, even with the reading recovery, because that didn't teach them any skills that actually helped. And so then they believed they were stupid. They were told they were stupid, and then they got in more trouble, and then they got in more trouble. And it just oh,
Mm.
squeezes my heart. Like I'm like, oh, they're just like my boys.
Yeah.
They just didn't get any support
Yeah.
that they needed,
No.
not through malice, just through lack of
Mm.
understanding.
Yeah. And
Mm,
that's the key, lack of understanding from the powers to be, you know. But it is getting better in the schools now, slowly.
yeah, yeah, it
Long
is.
way to go.
Yeah. And I liked that you mentioned unschooling, because, and obviously you meant it through the lens of
Yeah.
deprogramming, the way that your daughter had been initially
Yes.
taught to learn so that she could do it her way and the way that worked. But yeah, that's quite interesting to me because my children are unschooled,
Yes.
as in it's natural learning.
Yeah.
It's child-led and we follow their interests. And the homeschooling community, for obvious reasons, there's a lot of neurodivergent children and families because partly because they're the out-of-the-box thinkers, partly
Yeah.
because some of them tried school and they were like, oh gosh, no. Or even the child may have even got, suspended, expelled. And so a lot of those children, when they come out, there's like an official term now of going through the process of deschooling. So it's like a detox of all that programming and also all of that stress
Mm.
of
Mm.
trying to squeeze into the system. So it's like that process, and then once you've deschooled, then you can learn
Yeah.
because you can just do it the way that it comes naturally.
Yeah. And I wished I'd known about, we didn't have many homeschools were mainly people who lived in rural districts too far away for a normal school. So we didn't have the homeschool network when my kids were growing up. And I did a lot of homeschooling myself through art and crafts and nature, a lot of work in nature. We used to have fairy gardens and little towns and all sorts in the dirt, and we'd play in the dirt. And my
Yeah.
kids learned they learned nature school. And that was important to me, to teach them the tactile part of schooling.
Mm.
And that helped ground them. There's a lot of schooling you can do out in nature. There's a lot of maths in nature.
Yeah.
There's a lot of geometry in nature.
Geometry, yeah, I was about to say.
Science, yeah. Chemical reactions, all sorts going on in nature.
That's
So
right. You're building
yeah,
things, it's physics, it's everything.
it is. It is. And it's amazing to be able to teach them, and especially boys. Boys seem to work really well in nature. If you're going to do measurements,
Mm.
go out in nature, go out in the grass and measure with a piece of rope or whatever you need. You don't have to sit with a piece of paper that says you've got to measure this and equate it to something else. You can do it in nature.
Yeah, totally. And it actually just makes so much more sense to learn things within a meaningful context,
Yeah,
in a practical context.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Tactile.
yeah,
Mm.
it's
And
not rock.
you mentioned about writing. You write everything down. Well, that's
Mm,
tactile. You're very tactile. So dyslexic or neurodivergent children are very tactile, and they learn from using their hands. And it's been proved that the more we write, and you probably know this, the more we write, the more it goes straight into our brains directly. Whereas if you're typing on a computer, on a keyboard, it doesn't go as quickly to the brain as it does with a writing action.
yeah. And that's right. It's all different ways of being tactile and accessing the different parts of the brain and making it kind of kinesthetic. But it's just that different people have slightly different ways
Yeah,
of doing that. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah, totally.
some people are very auditory, so they'll listen and completely absorb it, whereas I would always listen but then make notes, or read it and then make notes, and someone else would draw a diagram. And yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I get that. Um, there's also an interesting with the neurotransmitters in your brain, how you can rewire your brain just as a stroke patient can rewire their brain.
Mm-hmm.
Dyslexic brains can be rewired. And that's something I learned from my daughter because her tutor wrote the Canadian curriculum for brain injured children. And her
Wow.
husband was a neuroscientist. So I learned a lot through her because my daughter was also audio. I don't know what the correct word was, but she'd hear an instruction
Mm-hmm.
and then it would get mashed up as it went through the neurotransmitters to her brain, and she'd get confused and get it wrong.
Yeah.
Auditory.
Yeah, it's auditory processing. So that's often those things. It's like the information, the sound or the light or whatever comes in fine, but the brain processes it in a not quite coherent way, or it takes longer, or and so there are things you can do to help with those kind of frustrating aspects of having a brain that works a bit differently. And there's lots of different you can take supplements that help with neurotransmitters, lots of different movement therapies, and of course spontaneously it will happen through doing things that we love as well. And so with the kinesiology that I practice, we work specifically with different pathways of the brain, but certainly that's not the only way of working with the brain. There's so many ways, and there's so much plasticity, and it's quite fascinating. And the interesting thing about that is I think we can shift some of the more frustrating aspects of being ADHD or dyslexic without giving up the wonderful aspects of it. You know what I mean? So if you're a big picture person, or you're sensitive, or the things that you're amazing at, those don't kind of get disappeared from you. Some people are like, oh, you can't try and cure people who are neurodivergent, and I'm like, I think they're kind of missing the point. If someone's frustrated and they want to change in a way that's beneficial to them, that's awesome, and they'll still be them, and they'll still retain the magic of being them. And so I don't know if you notice, there's a certain vibe that neurodivergent people have, and that's true whether they've worked on various things or not. It's like the underlying essence.
No, I get that. It's I think it's almost like you said before, it's almost trendy to be neurodivergent now. And people say, oh yeah, I'm ADHD, I'm ADD and dyslexic and all sorts of other things, autistic. I'm on the spectrum. Well, now they talk about the spectrum. It's just a spectrum. You're just at different stages in the spectrum. So it's almost taking those labels away from the spectrum. You're on a spectrum, but you're on a wonderful journey too, and it's a beautiful place to be, because you're bringing so much more interesting elements to this world through thinking outside the box, and not thinking on a lateral plane. You're thinking on a 5D plane, and they are often sensitive people.
Sensitive people, quirky people, amazing people, and that's the thing. And it's kind of like once you're tuned into it, you can pick those people. So we met not that long ago, and straight away I was like, oh, I love you, you're one of my people. And so then I wasn't at all surprised when I saw you post something about dyslexia. I was like, oh yeah.
I said the same about you. I hugged you and I said, oh, you're one of my fairy people.
Yeah. And when I was a little girl, I had this thing I would do. I'd go out into the back garden. I'm very much a nature girl. And I'd have my fairy circles, and I'd have all my, imaginary fairies, and we dance. And then someone would come outside, and I'd just be like act like I was doing nothing.
And I picked you straight away.
That's it. Yeah, there's just an energy. Yeah.
You know what? Do you know what? It makes my heart sing, because I see you as normal.
Yeah, or whatever that is. Yeah.
You're one of us.
Yeah, that's right.
I was too scared to be a little bit different, because I was like you were saying, I was trying to be in that box and be normal, and almost too scared, so I was really quiet. And I went into the mouse hole and hid, because you don't want to be seen to be different.
That's right.
But
And
now
it's so,
I don't care now.
yeah, you don't give it. It's so
Yeah,
liberating to just, just
what you see is what you get.
be yourself, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and you naturally connect with your soul family. And so I'm in no way saying that, I see some people neurotypical bashing, and I'm like, don't do that, because everyone's a divine being of light. But it's just this kind of resonance factor where
Yeah.
you find the people who, are part of your pod. I don't know. Yeah.
Part of your pod, your tribe, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite refreshing to meet people like you as well. It's beautiful. Yeah.
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 Super cool. And we'll finish up soon, but I'm just gonna circle back. We're talking about how the dyslexic brain integrates and unschooling. So my oldest boy, the one who I said was very obviously, hyperactive. Most people who meet him in passing wouldn't necessarily guess that now. Actually, he's 11 and he's super engaging and all of those things, but is fairly well self-regulated actually. But because my boys haven't been in school and they've been sort of unschooled, and boys often read later. I mean, for a long time, I didn't know whether he had any trouble reading. And then when he was about, I don't know, maybe 8, he was suddenly quite interested in learning to read. And so I was like, okay, let's do some stuff together. And we did, and it was really low pressure, and we started really slow, but it was not easy for him. Like I remember, for me, that was one of the things that just came easy. When I started school, I could already read and I loved to read. But with him, it was like, slowly sounding out the words. And I noticed he did reverse his B's and his D's, and he lost his place on the page quite easily. And, simple words that you think he would have memorized, he'd forget. And but it was, it was okay. It was low pressure because he was at home. And so it just progressed really slowly. And sometimes he'd try a bit, sometimes he wouldn't. And then all of a sudden, around 10, he just took off. And so there's a lot to be said to just, allowing the organic growth and integration of the brain, and letting people do things supported in appropriate ways in their own time frame. And so now I ask him to stop reading. It just accelerated so fast. I'll be like, okay, honey, you might want to put the book down so you can go to sleep. Or you might feel nauseous soon if you keep reading in the car. He's just flying through his books. And so and he does still reverse his B's and D's sometimes, but it just seems to have all come together. And I'm sure it's a whole variety of factors that are involved in that. But yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, my son was no different. He's now a high school teacher. He didn't learn to start reading until he was 7. And then he all he wanted to do was be outside. But he had one teacher that just sat on top of him and made him read, which was good for him. She was good for him. She disciplined him. And now he's a high school teacher, a science teacher. But he recognizes other kids. He recognizes neurodivergence through his own research. He recognizes the children that need help, and he loves to be able to help them in mainstream school.
Yeah, that's such a great gift. And for most of us, that's part of the gift of sometimes having had you know, challenging or even traumatic experiences when we're younger. The gift is learning from it and then being able to
Yeah,
assist
definitely.
others. Yeah. But coming back to the nature bit, I mean, it's just so simple, but so incredibly powerful. Yeah. So my 8-year-old pretty much never wears shoes. And it's almost like the super strong intuitive knowingness of needing to ground.
Yeah.
And so he does. Yeah, nature makes everything better, and pets, if you're able to have pets as
Yes.
well. We got a
Yes.
dog, completely life-changing. And I'm not even a dog person, I'm a cat person, but that dog is the best non-official therapy dog
Yeah.
ever. Yeah.
They are. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So
Mm,
something I've always had with our children was animals. We lived on a farm, so we had animals, all sorts of animals.
mm,
And animals also need to ground.
that's true. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's good to remember. Um, yeah, especially if you're a city dweller.
Yes. Or, or a boat person.
Or a boat person. Yeah, and all the Wi-Fi and stuff now that can affect our pets as well as our kids.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So I want to finish off by maybe hearing a bit more about your feet on the ground
Okay.
forest immersion, because you have an event coming up soon, is that right?
No, I've had it last weekend.
But you're going to have another
Um,
one, maybe?
yes, I'm going to have another one on, where's my diary? Um,
We can write it in the description as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, on 29th of November, Sunday the 29th of November, but I haven't decided where yet. I've got an idea, but I'm going to collab with another forest fairy
Amazing.
as well. So forest energy immersion therapy, feet on the ground.
Okay, yeah,
I
that's where the extra
chose,
E.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So I could have feet on the
yes.
ground. Um, so it's Shinrin Yoku, forest bathing. Yes, it is. But it's not just walking through the forest and saying, oh, this is lovely tree. This is nice. I
Mm.
feel nice here. I'm filling my endorphin cup, so to speak, because you do fill up your endorphin cup. You can't help it because the air's fresh and the smell's lovely and the tree's lovely.
Mm.
But it's also connecting with the energy of the trees.
Mm.
So trees have auras,
Mm-hmm.
and trees have energy. So trees are molecular structures just as we are. So they have the same sort of energy as we do. They have food um, tubes running up through them and food tubes just as we do. And so they are fed through the soil, through them, and in the soil there is lots of what they call mycelium, as you
Mm-hmm.
probably know,
Mm-hmm.
which are minute little mushrooms, and the mycorrhiza's of that's the little
That's it, branch
tendrils,
off. Yeah.
yeah, that branch off. They then connect with the hair roots of the trees.
Mm.
So they make this little connection and then they talk to the tree and they send food, they send messages through the trees. And the mycelium are the transmitters of the language, so to speak, the
Mm-hmm.
energy from tree to tree. And then they can send healing. So there might be a tree over there that's looking a bit sick due to climatic conditions, say. So they'll send from another tree, they'll send healing to that tree. And so we as human beings, through grounding on the earth, in the forests, in the parks, even on the grass, even if you've just got one tree in your
Mm.
backyard, you can ground and you can connect with those trees. Trees also have messages. I have been by many trees and they've given me information. And a couple of trees recently that I've come across, people have died on these trees. So I've been able to release spirits from these trees as well. Yeah, so there is, it's just as you tap in, there's so many messages, so much knowledge. Some of these trees have been around thousands and thousands of years and seen so many changes through Earth evolution. And so my wish is that everybody on this earth can experience tree energy and learn from these trees and connect and commune with the trees. And I want to be able to teach people this and just give them the opportunity to learn this tree language.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's so incredible when we take these things for granted sometimes day to day, just the incredible connectivity and wisdom that's available in
Yeah.
nature, in the trees, and the soil, and how it all connects with our own bodies and our energy fields. And
Yeah.
I love that so much. Yeah, it's
Thank
such a
you.
powerful
Yeah.
thing to be bringing through to people. So
Mm.
if you're interested in Pauline's work, you can check out her website. So it's paulinecartwright.com. Yeah, I was going to say, I know it's something simple, but we will list it in the description, so you can
Thank
follow
you.
the link.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. And check out her offerings. Yeah, super amazing to connect
Thank
with the
you.
earth. And thank you for sharing your experiences. And I will
Thank you.
just add that Ananda Rose and I are also on the theme of neurodivergence. We're also doing some sessions bringing in light codes for neurodivergent people. And
Wow.
so, yeah, it's not about, bringing in something from outside you. It is in a sense, but it's also more powerfully activating what's within. So those sessions have meditations and light language from Rose, and some energy work as well, because we
Beautiful.
sometimes might feel a little bit alone, maybe less than we used to, but this soul network is strengthening and spreading.
Mm.
And check it out. And so, thank you so much for coming on to chat.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. So
Pleasure.
lovely being here. It's been such a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been awesome. All right. Bye, everyone. And we'll see you next time on the Ananda Rose Show.
Thank you.
Bye.